Hello, sisters, and welcome to Go Solo Live. This is Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel. It's time to sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy my conversation with Carol Perehudoff as she shares about her experiences as a travel writer and blogger and even spa reviewer. It's a fascinating tale.
Welcome to Go Solo Live.
Don't you mean Go Solo Live? Have you ever been asked, why on earth would you travel alone? Go Solo Live not only answers that question, but celebrates life as a midlife solo traveler. This is a safe place for women to come together to reminisce about their travels, encourage others to travel, and to dig into the real lessons learned from these journeys. Now join Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel as she and her guests share stories of the solo travelers of midlife women.
Joining me today is Carol Perehudoff, and she is better known as Wandering Carol. And I'm so excited. She's going to be joining us today from Toronto. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you. Welcome. Yeah, welcome. I'm so glad to be here.
I'm so glad you took the time out of your day to share your stories with us. And we'll tell everybody at the end where to find you, but Wandering Carol is a pretty easy tag name to find you. So it's exciting to see everything that you have to offer folks. You are a traveler, a luxury blogger, and have so many exciting tales to share.
Yeah, I've got a few. I've been traveling for decades now, so like many of us. So I have a few stories.
So how did you get your start traveling?
You know, I wanted to travel from day one. As soon as I finished university, I worked 2 jobs. The minute I had enough money, I went to Europe. I flew to England. I didn't know anybody, and I got a job there. I traveled all over Spain and Germany, and I didn't go home for a year and a half. My poor mother.
Was that the original plan?
No, it wasn't. Yeah, there was if you were under 27, there was a program called SWAP, and you could get a visa for England, for Commonwealth. I think US can do it too. So that really got me started. I worked terrible jobs, and I didn't care, just to be there. So traveling was not ever a decision. It was a given for me.
So how do you think that got instilled in you growing up?
Well, my parents were foolish and took me to England when I was 15. That was their mistake. No, I actually think it is part of my makeup, and other people are like this too. And I have an uncle who's the same. He had to work all over the world. It's nothing I can really blame anyone for. It's, if you've got to travel, you've got to travel. And even if you're not like that, I find you can develop that. If you're scared to travel or you don't have that urge from the very beginning, you can get that anyway. You can just get brave. You can research, and anyone can do it. For me, it was never a real question.
Well, that's pretty amazing. So, you know, as we're talking about how that is actually like part of your DNA, how it's just part of your composition. But a lot of people start to say, well, but Carol, you're married. How does your husband let you travel? Which is one of the funniest questions I've ever heard. But how did you negotiate that in your marriage?
I would say it's still a negotiation in our marriage. I married late. I married very late. And one of the most powerful solo trips I've ever done was the day we went to sign the contract at the Hyatt to have our wedding and the reception. And after I signed the contract, my husband drove me to the airport, and I went to Thailand for 6 weeks. Like, see, but I needed to do that to know that my life, I don't want to say that it was over now that I was married, but that it was a new adventure, and it wasn't going to be the end of my passion, which is to travel. So it's still an ongoing issue, and it's something I talk about a lot. Probably he would love never to talk about it, but it's just something. He knew what I was when we met. We met when I was giving a talk on solo travel at the Royal Ontario Museum here in Toronto. So I remember in the beginning saying to him that one of the very first trips I did after we started dating, I went to Italy, and coming back, and he was, I wanted to rest. I wanted to write because I am a writer and I had things to do, and I had jet lag. I didn't want to leap back into relationship, Carol. And I remember saying to him, well, I was a travel writer. Did it never occur to you I was going to travel? No.
How interesting.
Yeah.
How interesting. So how long have you been married now?
4 years and 3 weeks.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And so no wonder it's still a continuing negotiation.
Yeah. We have been together over 9 years now. And I think you have to marry someone fairly independent, but there's always going to be things to work out. And there's going to be great trips to take together as well. So they're not losing out by losing you when you're gone. They're also gaining something they might not have.
Well, and a lot of gentlemen, appreciate the fact that they get some of their own alone time as well, and they don't have to work that hard to negotiate that.
Right. As long as there's hockey on TV, I think he's good.
I love it. That's fantastic. So let's talk about, as an adult, where have some of your most amazing solo travels been?
It depends. I've had amazing trips that were fun and exciting and eye-opening. And I've also had hard trips that maybe changed me in different ways. And looking back, maybe those are even more important than the great trips. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. And I had my master's in fine art, and I applied for an obscure scholarship. And I ended up in Korea, knowing no one, doing an MBA, Master's in Business Administration, with no background in finance. I didn't speak Korean, and I ended up staying there for years. And
that's unusual. Let's be real.
Yeah. And it wasn't easy. It was a big growth trip for me because it went on a long time. And I wasn't a baby. I'd already graduated with a graduate degree. But, I went through loneliness. I went through heartbreak. I went through wandering around Asia as, a tall, thin blonde who was younger than I am now. And there was a lot of attention that was unsettling, and there was excitement. I fell in love, and there was jobs, like crazy jobs. I ended up doing my master's, working full-time, teaching English at a university, and being in videos like, Miss Smith, the American teacher, on the weekend. So it was hard, and it was also super fun. There were so many, I had great friends there in the end, and we would go out. So I was exhausted. I got sick a lot. And I think all of that added up into kind of shattering me. And then once I got away and I picked up the pieces, the person that was left was not the same person that went there. And I think it was a much more real person, maybe not so into living just for the now, but living deeper. Does that make sense?
Of course it does. Of course it does. So can you, as we dig into a little bit more about that trip, because it sounds like that was, like you said, some of those challenging trips are the ones that have the most impact. Yeah. Where were you at in your life when you went?
I was at a crossroads. I had been working as an artist and doing quite well, but I'd always wanted to write. And I think I didn't really have a home. I was in Edmonton for 2 years doing my master's where I didn't grow up. And, I'd been living in Europe before that. I was rootless, and I was looking for something. So that's where I was. I was at a real transition point in my life.
Yeah, that's a big deal. So what I'm mentioning in that is that when we are already at that crossroads, when we're at that place where we're looking for something else, and then we travel, we certainly will find something else. And then we have to just kind of reconcile are we finding something that's good and healthy and going to help us grow? Or are we finding something that maybe is fast healing therapy, but might not be the right thing for us for long-term growth?
That is so true. So, sometimes I think travel is like, it's almost like a tornado, and you don't know, pieces of you are being stripped off, other pieces are coming to the front. You don't really know what you're going to be left with in the end. But what a trip, what a whirlwind ride.
I love that. Travel is like a tornado, and you don't know what it's going to be like. But, part of that is we have to be ready to be all in and to accept that if you're going into that travel tornado and you're all like bundled up with all these extra layers of stuff and of like literal and figurative baggage, you won't really be open to the full spectrum of possibility that travel provides. You're going to be really protected from that. But if you go in ready to almost embrace that tornado and say, so if it gets rid of all this junk, if it gets rid of some of this stuff, this clutter, this mind clutter. I know when I came back from one of my travels, I went into a huge minimalist mode because I realized I had so much stuff that was just not necessary, right?
Right.
So if you're willing to be open to the fact that travel is going to shift your brain on some of those things, hold on tight because it's going to happen.
We are so deep, aren't we?
I love the travel as a tornado kind of analogy, though. I don't know that I'm going to let that one go. That's really good.
On the other hand, I don't want to scare people because some trips are the opposite. They're like, what, a cool wave, I when I went to Thailand just before getting married, that was the opposite. I think I had found what I was looking for. I needed a very calm space to not really think about it, but just feel it and go for the proverbial long walks on the beach at sunset and eat food, beautiful Thai food, and look out, at the ocean. And that was such a calming trip that maybe the baggage got stripped away in Korea, but that was a trip that really helped me realize that maybe I was grounded now and I was ready for marriage. Sometimes you have to be alone to know you don't need to be alone.
Well, and so, what I like even more is that, there's some sort of intention that comes with this. That, when you're saying maybe it's this or maybe it's that, or maybe it's whatever you're really looking for, that you have the possibility of kind of saying, gosh, on this trip, I'm really hoping to work through or process and give it some particular intention and let the trip give you the answers that you're looking for.
That is a wonderful way to look at travel. Like, you might not even realize what you are looking for, but maybe it's going to seek you out as much as, like you say, if you're open to it.
Exactly. So let's talk before you got to the whole wedding and meeting this gentleman. You actually were saying that you were speaking about solo travel. So tell us a little bit about what's brought you to some of the speaking about solo travel.
I truly made my career as a solo traveler. I knew I wanted to write, and I went to a writing workshop. I tried to get in the fiction workshop, but it was full, so I ended up in the nonfiction workshop. I just wrote about my travels, and honestly, people didn't like my fiction that much. But when I wrote about my real experiences, people were like, oh, can I have a copy? I want to send it to my wife. And oh my God, the stories are great. You should think about doing this. I didn't know travel writing was a thing. Never occurred to me. But I wrote 3 stories about trips I had taken all alone. And I sent them to newspapers, and I sold one to a local free weekly magazine here, one to the Toronto Star, which is Canada's biggest newspaper, one to the San Francisco Chronicle, and then one to the New York Post. that was my first few articles. And right then I knew that this was my world. And the Toronto Star editor of the travel section, he invited me into the newsroom, the travel section. And he said, like, we want to make you part of the family. We're looking for someone who can go and travel. And within a year, he said, what do you want? And I said, I want a column on solo travel. So that started, I was always freelance. I was never full-time, but that started my column, which I had for quite a few years. And, it coincided with my life because I was single and I just love solo travel. So that's how the ROM, the Royal Ontario Museum, they had a kind of an upscale singles night that they had a guest speaker, usually from university or.
Sure.
Yeah. So that I was the speaker, and that's when I saw my husband.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing. So you didn't go into this planning to be a writer.
No,
At least
I fell into it. Yeah.
You were also open to it.
I was so open to it. Oh, like two passions in my life, writing and traveling, that you can marry those two things and actually make a career of it. And now with blogging, anybody can do, I'm not going to say anyone can make a living easily because it's tough, but nobody can stop you. The thing is, when I started, I had to get past editors because that was about 2002.
Yep.
And I'd never heard of blogging. And so I wrote mainly for newspapers, so quite a few magazines as the time went on. But now anyone can just do it and see if that's their path.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you started traveling first, then you started writing about the travel and then got published. So as you were doing some of this, where were some of your favorite places to travel?
I have favorites. It's kind of like, what is your favorite child? But
right.
Thailand will always be a spiritual homeland for me. I have spent a lot of time there. I've had fun there. I've had contemplative time there. It's just a place I love. And London, because that was really the first jumping off point for me. London, England, it will always have my heart. And the south of France is my retirement dream.
Is your husband on board with that one?
Well, I try and whisper in his head, in his ear when he's sleeping, and I haven't quite got the microchip planted in his brain yet, but I'm working on it. Yeah.
One step at a time, right?
One step at a time.
I love it. So tell me a little bit more about why the south of France is your place.
There's something about the south of France, and I found it in certain other towns, oddly enough, Banff, Alberta, in the mountains, that are small town, beautiful location, but there's an international vibe. Because I love traveling, if I'm not traveling, I want to be surrounded by maybe other people who are traveling or a place where people want to travel to. I like to visit really isolated places, but to settle down, I want that international feeling. The south of France has the views, the art. I mean, Cézanne painted there, Monet, everybody, Picasso, Matisse. So you've got that element of culture, and then you've got this beautiful, soft way of living with wine and that amazing Riviera light. And it's just a very gracious lifestyle.
Sounds incredible.
Yes.
So what was your first experience there, though? That I always think that one of the places that we love to go back to, so one of my places is New Zealand.
Oh, really?
And, I just know every time I go back, it's like feeling like I'm coming home. But there's nothing like that first time.
That's very insightful, because when I said I love London, that's where my parents took me when I was 15. when I was 16, I actually did a French exchange program in Nice, France, in the south of France. And I wonder if there is something about when you're really malleable and not quite set in your ways, if that gets into your subconscious and you do start thinking of it as sort of a home or a home base. But then Thailand doesn't fit into that, so I'm not quite sure. But
No, but like the other part is like how long are we able to spend in some of those places and how safe or comfortable did we feel? And,
yeah,
I think in Thailand, you made a place for yourself.
yeah. Well, I do feel safe in Thailand. I just feel at peace. Nobody bothers me really. But I mean, of course, things go on. If I'm always cautious. And I did have an issue in Thailand. Oddly enough, it was with another Canadian, a Canadian man. Here you are in a foreign country. You don't think you're going to be harassed by someone you could meet down, in your neighborhood. So everywhere I go as a woman, I am always really, there's just an undercurrent of caution and alertness. You can never forget that. It's easy to forget it, but wherever you are, yeah. But
I
there
agree.
is an element to that, yeah.
So would you share a little bit about the story of what happened with this Canadian gentleman while you were overseas?
Well, I'll give you it wasn't really bad, but it was bad enough to unsettle me. I was lonely. I had gone now 11 days without talking to anyone except maybe a shopkeeper. And I do remember counting that was the 11th day. And usually I meet people when I travel. So these people started talking to me and I was thrilled. And they were all guys and they were good looking, won't lie. And so I arranged to meet them that evening. One in particular was saying, "Oh, you should come to this club." And I mean, I was a lot younger and I did like to go out. And I went, but he just got a little too, it wasn't fun at this point. And I was never alone with him, but kind of even alone between the club and a taxi, I felt like I am out of control, and he ended up apologizing in a very nasty way when I ran into him a year later in Thailand again. The luck, I know.
Who would ever expect that to happen?
That is traveling for you. I think Thailand gets into their blood. And the thing is, you're all, when you're on a budget, you're all going to the same streets where all the cheaper places. It's not as crazy as it sounds. But that made me realize, the danger can be in your own backyard. And you just always have to have this sense of being alert. But on the same time, you're alone. You got to talk to people. It's just such a fine balance, But it's very rare that I would feel out of control or that someone wants to do me harm.
Absolutely. But again, I think part of that is trusting your gut, knowing your surroundings, always having a plan.
Which I didn't. And I know what happened was just I got lonely. I think I'm good about a week without talking to anyone. 11 days was one day too many. And that made me realize, you know what? Sometimes being alone is fine. You don't have to talk to people. Don't let it override what your instincts are saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nope, I appreciate that. It's good a reminder for everybody. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, I just want to counter that by saying how many amazing people I have met from all over the world. So I have one or two, I've had a taxi driver completely rip me off or this and that. But then I think one day I was walking down the street in Korea. It was raining. There had been a story in the news about acid rain. A Korean woman came up to me in the pouring rain, insisted I take her umbrella. She wouldn't take it back. She ran off in the rain so that I was protected. That to me says so much about travel and the good in the world.
And those stories come out so much more frequently than those bad stories. So it is important that we keep perspective in our mind about the balance. But there's so much good and there's so much generosity. And I love doing this show for that very reason, is you can find those stories from all over the world.
All over. It's so heartwarming. There are good people everywhere, and there are people who aren't so good. But what would it be, like 10,000 to 1 for good against evil?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the other part is, depending on what lens we're looking for things, if we're looking for the bad, if we're looking for the trouble, we will find it. We will see the dirty in the city. We will see people who look suspicious. And it's not to say that we want to shelter ourselves from that, but if you instead go in focusing on looking for the good, you will see that as well.
And also, when you're traveling solo, you are so much more open to the good and bad because you don't have a support system. It's not like when you're with your best friend or your husband or your girlfriend. You are dependent on the kindness of strangers, and you're also more in tune. It's so easy to get in a conversation about something back home if you're with someone from back home. But when you're alone, you are so much more in communication with the culture that you're in. And that is the beauty of it. And it's also the stressful part of it too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So where are you going to be going next? What's on your travel wish list if you haven't quite gotten there yet?
Well, where I'm going is Palm Springs. I'm just going for 5 days in December. Then we are up in the air right now. My husband and I try and do Europe at least once every couple of years. Although last year I finally got him to Asia for the first time. And then for work, what I'm trying to do is not travel quite so much because I just came back from 3 weeks in Ireland. And then before that I was in Wales, and we did Vietnam and Thailand. So I've been around a lot this year, as every year. But my wish list is probably, oh my gosh, I have such a big wish list right now because Canada's getting cold. How about Bora Bora or Fiji? Wouldn't that be something else?
That is wonderful. Now I've been to Fiji for scuba diving. Do you have hobbies that take you places as well, or is it more related to your work?
Well, this sounds so bad. I'm a spa rater as well.
Yes, so I saw.
I do tend to go around the world and check out some lovely spas. That is kind of a hobby of mine. But also, I'm not a water person. I envy you that you can scuba dive. I'm scared of water. I do it. I'll snorkel, but that's as deep as I'm getting. But I love heights. I just went on the fastest zip line in the world in Wales.
Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. I am scared of heights. I've done a couple zip lines, but that does not sound appealing to me. So I'll stay underwater. You stay up high.
Perfect. Yeah, this one goes in excess of 100 miles an hour. I'm sure I didn't get to 100 miles an hour, but I flew, and wasn't scared. I didn't scream. I'm an eagle soaring in the air. It's like fabulous.
That's amazing. So do you go chasing some of those types of thrills as well?
I do. This has been my summer of outdoor adventure. I have ziplined twice. I've gone coasteering. You might like this. You're the water person. It's really big in Wales and Ireland. You kind of hurl yourself off a cliff, or it's not far, but you go into a craggy coastline, and you're caving, you're climbing, you're leaping, and it's an interesting way of seeing the landscape. That's a really new, novel sport. So I did that, lots of cycling. Yeah, I love getting outside. I love canoeing, kayaking. I just love it.
That sounds amazing. And the coasteering is actually something my students did when we were in New Zealand last January.
Oh, really?
Yes. So they got it, those New Zealanders, the Kiwis will always invent something crazy to do. So
it is a little crazy. Got to go with a guide. Don't go without a guide, people.
Absolutely. For safety purposes, do not go without a guide. I love it. That's fantastic. So now, again, you do the spas. So and I know we could find this on your website, we will direct people there, but right off the top of your head, of course, give me a couple spas that you're like, I can't either wait to go back to, or I recommend everybody check it out if they get a chance.
Ooh, let's see. I love the medical type of organic spa in Europe. And this goes way back to the 1800s when they would take the waters, the hot springs, and they would soak in them, and they would have mud, and they would do walks. It's a lifestyle. It's actually like you can go for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, and you see a spa doctor. The Czech Republic is amazing for their spas. And Italy also has spas like this where you actually see a doctor at your hotel, and they prescribe, you must soak in this hot spring for 40 minutes every 3 days. You must have this mud wrap. You must, walk here. And it's so rejuvenating. So definitely the Czech Republic and Italy would be my 2 favorite spa destinations.
Outstanding. And, it's funny because there really are incredible spas all over the world. But understanding that each will have its own nature as well, like the different treatments come from a lot of the culture as well as, the organic origins around them. So to be open to some of those experiences as well.
Can you imagine when I first started traveling with my husband, explaining to him the joys of the medical spa? But I planned the honeymoon, so it was a spa in Germany called Baden-Baden, a spa town in Switzerland called Leukerbad, and then a spa in Italy called Abano. But, if you explain that these have great hiking areas, they're beautiful areas, that is also such a great place for a solo traveler just to renew and refresh.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And they're affordable.
Say that again.
And they're affordable.
They're affordable.
Czech Republic is fabulous for affordable and gracious. Like, the royalty used to go to these spas. So these buildings are just like mansions.
Yes, they are quite stunning. It is somewhat unbelievable that's something that's available to us after all the time. One of my most interesting spas was in Rotorua in New Zealand, and it had the natural springs, the sulfur springs, and that's a 5-star spa. And to have that be so accessible because it's just where everybody goes because that's the standard of what they have.
That is my dream spa, is the ones with the sulfurous water. There's so many healing minerals. I mean, not all. You can have a poisonous spring too, but these ones are very measured and they're carefully, monitored.
Exactly. Well, I highly recommend it. So that is something to put on your bucket list, right?
Yeah, I'm there.
And those bucket lists keep growing longer and longer. I think actually the more I travel, the more I want to travel.
Absolutely. The more places you go, the more you learn about other places, and it's a tornado.
I love it. Well, Carol, I'd love to make sure that people know where to find you and how to follow you so that they don't lose track of all of the exciting things that you have to share.
Absolutely. My blog is wanderingcarol.com. Pretty straightforward. My Instagram is @wanderingcarol. And my Facebook is @wanderingcarolblog. And Twitter is @wanderingcarol. And that's just one L. WANDERINGCAROL.com.
That's wonderful. And those will be in our show notes if everybody wants to take a look at those so they can connect with you and see what you are up to next. Carol, Thank you so much for sharing your stories and being a part of my show today.
Well, thank you for making sense of all my stories. I think I learned from you.
It's all about perspective sometimes, and I look forward to seeing what you're up to next.
Thank you so much.
Wasn't it great to hear the stories that Carol shared with us today? I love the analogy of travel like a tornado, and then on the flip side, how travel can be like a cool wave. Travel can be whatever you want it to be. So if you go in with a particular intention, just be ready, because that intention will very likely be realized. If you love these stories and want to help support Go Solo Live, you can do that by making a small financial contribution to the show. There are a lot of options with some great gifts of appreciation when you go to www.patreon.com/GoSoloLive. That's www.patreon.com. Well, sisters, we've reached the end of today's episode, but the conversation doesn't have to end there. Go to www.transformviatravel.com and join our email list, or follow us on Facebook at Transform Via Travel. Until next time, remember, go solo, not alone.